Welcome to Module 3. We're going to focus on two interrelated aspects of gifted education, program planning and acceleration. Program planning helps ensure that gifted students receive instruction that challenges them academically, supports their social emotional growth, and recognizes their unique learning profiles. Acceleration is one of the most effective strategies for matching curriculum to student readiness. And research consistently demonstrates its positive academic and social emotional outcomes when implemented thoughtfully. By the end of the module, you'll understand key planning components, explore various types of acceleration, and consider how Louisiana's IEP framework shapes these practices. So we are so excited to continue our study in Education 686 here at McNeese State University, Burton College of Education. I'm Dr. Lori Benoit, and I've prepared this lecture for you today. Please note that it coincides with our text, chapters 4 and 5 of Education of the Gifted and Talented. Let's go ahead and dive in to learn about program planning and acceleration in gifted education. In this session, we're going to examine how programs for gifted learners are intentionally designed to meet their cognitive, creative, and social emotional needs. We'll discuss differentiation, including both enrichment and acceleration, and how to align instruction with the student's readiness level rather than chronological age. These strategies help prevent underachievement, sustain engagement, and provide appropriate challenges. Also, they just seem to be more fun for our students. Understanding both planning and acceleration gives you practical tools for designing programs that truly support each gifted student. Effective program planning starts with clear goals and objectives that articulate what the program intends to achieve academically, creatively, and socially. Identification criteria ensure that students who need services are accurately recognized. Curriculum differentiation allows instruction to be tailored by content, process, product, and learning environment, accommodating varied student abilities. Finally, flexible grouping and pacing make it possible to match instruction with individual student needs, whether that's in a pull-out model, which means that students are going to be placed in a regular setting, an at-level setting, and they will be pulled out maybe once a day, maybe one day per week to receive specialized instruction. A cluster group, so even within a class of all identified gifted peers, we may have cluster grouping where the gifted students or those who are advancing in a particular aspect of the content are going to be clustered. And then we also have what's called a self-contained classroom. And this means that all students in the classroom are identified as gifted. Each element works together to create a comprehensive, responsive program. Gifted programs take many forms, each with distinct advantages and challenges. So as we mentioned in the previous slide, pull-out programs. So let's talk a little bit more about them. They provide enrichment for a few hours a week while students remain in general classrooms for core subjects. And so in our local district here in Louisiana, that might be at the elementary level, that's called the Spark program. And students are pulled out one day per week from their regular elementary classes, and they participate in what's called the Spark program. All of the students in the Spark program are gifted, and they spend an entire day. It might be at their same school, or they might be bused to an alternative site where they are able to have interactions with students who have also been bused from other satellite campuses. And it allows them to group for one day a week and participate in all types of activities that are directed to meet their gifted needs. The next type is called cluster grouping. And I talked a little bit about it on the previous slide, but let's go into a little bit more detail here. Cluster grouping places gifted learners together within a regular classroom. It offers peer interaction and differentiated instruction. Now, something that I want you to understand about cluster grouping is for the purposes of our textbook for this course, our authors typically think of it as all of the students in the class are at mixed ability levels, and you're going to have a group of them that are identified as gifted. And that group is going to be separated during maybe like small group time, enrichment time, etc. And they're going to receive instruction. Their gifted needs are going to be met that way. There is another type, and it is where all of the students in the class are gifted, but maybe there are some who are exceptionally advanced in a particular topic. Let's say, for example, math. And based on testing, maybe 5 out of 15 students are performing several grade levels above even their gifted peers, which does happen. Cluster grouping can take place that way. So it's typically thought of in a regular classroom setting. The identified would be cluster. That's how we typically think of it. But I just want you to be aware of the other type because you might see that when you're actually in the field. Let's talk about the self-contained classes. These dedicate the entire learning environment to gifted students, allowing for advanced pacing and curriculum. And so you see this in many of our larger districts in Louisiana that have robust gifted programs. But in the smaller districts, maybe some of the more rural ones, there simply are not enough personnel, there's not enough funding, and there may not be enough gifted identified students to justify these large self-contained classes. You can imagine that many stakeholders really appreciate their students having an opportunity to have some self-contained classes, maybe not all of them, but at least some of them to be considered self-contained. And now let's talk about full-time gifted schools. These serve exclusively gifted populations and can provide highly specialized instruction. The type of program selected depends on student needs, school resources, policy requirements, and state guidelines. So full-time gifted students in gifted schools rather in Louisiana are actually fairly rare. We do have some, but they are rather rare. They are more prevalent in other states. We know that Texas, it has quite a lot, especially in their large urban areas, and California has quite a lot in their large urban areas. There are other states, of course, around the nation that may have some more of what we consider the full-time gifted schools, but as I mentioned, those are actually pretty rare in Louisiana. So now let's talk about acceleration. I just clipped this quote because I think that it helps really define and refine our understanding of what acceleration is. But when we think about the question, what is acceleration? I want you to keep this quote in mind. Progress through an educational program at rates faster or at ages younger than conventional. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, conventional, and why sometimes acceleration is imperative to meet the needs of our gifted students. So acceleration is one of the most powerful strategies for meeting the needs of gifted learners. Its main purpose is simple: to align the curriculum with the student's ability and readiness, not their chronological age. So that's where we wrap back around to that quote, that definition about what acceleration is. We oftentimes define conventional levels by our students' chronological ages, and that sometimes can really miss the mark when it comes to gifted students' needs. Acceleration includes grade skipping, subject-specific advancement, early entrance to school or college, and curriculum compacting. Research consistently demonstrates that acceleration benefits students academically while maintaining or even enhancing social emotional well-being. It prevents boredom, sustains engagement, and helps students fully develop their talents. Thoughtful planning is key to successful acceleration for gifted students. So let's talk a little bit about the common forms of acceleration. So I found this graphic online. I have no idea where it comes from, so I'm sorry I can't have a citation for it, but it was just readily available on Google. But I thought that it did such a great job of kind of showing all the different ways that we accelerate, not just gifted students, but we offer these opportunities many times to all of our students, whether they're identified gifted or not. But it kind of just throws a lot of them up there so that you can get an idea of what we're talking about. But we are going to go over a couple of main categories. Firstly, let's talk about whole grade acceleration. This involves moving a student ahead an entire grade level. This is effective for students who are advanced across multiple subjects. So these are going to be what we consider the highly gifted. These are students, in order to move an entire grade level, it's going to have to be well documented in our school system through testing, through stakeholder advocacy and testimonials. And also the child is going to typically have some say in the decision because there are other factors to consider besides just academics. Sometimes, for example, very, very rarely, but I have seen where a student could qualify for whole grade acceleration, but he also was extremely talented when it came to athletics. And athletically, moving him ahead of grade would have disadvantaged him when it came to playing time, his ability to really excel in some of the athletics. So he and his parents, I think he was about upper elementary when he made the decision to just stay in the grade that he was in and maybe do some subject acceleration, which we'll talk about in a moment, because we were trying to meet the needs of the whole child, not just the academic needs. Subject matter acceleration is another option. This advances a student in a single area, such as math, science, or language arts, while keeping them with age peers in other subjects. The most often one that we typically see is math acceleration. It's very easily measured, and it's also the one that students tend to ask for, to be honest. And we see this not only with gifted students, but we also see this with non-gifted students. So we're trying to accelerate many of our students when it comes to their math proficiencies. So this is an area where subject matter acceleration seems to just fit really well. We do see it in others, though. Science, I do not see it as much in the humanities, however. But it's something to consider moving forward. Is this an area where, we should be perhaps considering more subject matter acceleration for our students who excel in the humanities, such as language arts, social studies, the social sciences, etc. Another area is advanced placement or dual enrollment. This allows high school students to take college level courses and earn college credit early. Obviously, we see this in our high school students. However, I have seen our middle school students who are more advanced sometimes will jump in and begin taking college classes even while they're technically still middle school students. Sometimes they do it over the summer and they actually enroll at their local college, and other times they do it through formal programming such as advanced placement and dual enrollment within the school system. The next type is called curriculum compacting. It streamlines what the student has already mastered, freeing time for more challenging or creative work. We actually see this quite a bit in the elementary classes, and this sometimes will help develop the small groups within a classroom, and those gifted students who are, really just excelling at even the more advanced core part of the course are going to be given opportunities to pursue maybe some independent choice activities that allow them to practice skills that are more advanced than what the teacher is working with the whole class. So each type of acceleration should consider the student's cognitive readiness, social emotional maturity, and long-term educational trajectory. Um, Even as early as elementary school, many of them are going to begin identifying what they want to do, what they want to pursue, what their professional aspirations are, or career, college and career study aspirations are. And that can help determine if accelerating is a good fit, if it's necessary, and if it fits the overall needs of the whole child. All right, so as we move forward, we want to talk a bit about the benefits of acceleration. We have discussed them in some of the previous slides, but we really want to dig in here. Acceleration aligns learning with the student's ability, keeping them challenged and motivated. It prevents disengagement, not completely. I'm not going to tell you that it's a fix it for all, motivation issues. But it does mitigate to prevent disengagement and underachievement. These are common problems for gifted students in age level classrooms, especially when they feel that the learning is not relevant for them. And you can imagine how frustrating that is when you're exposed to material over and over again that you've really already mastered. It becomes increasingly difficult to squelch the boredom that one must feel. And of course, for some students, that just means overall disengagement. For others, it might mean acting out. So, social emotional research shows that accelerated students generally adjust well when they are matched with peers at similar cognitive levels. Long-term studies indicate that acceleration contributes to higher academic achievement, greater satisfaction with learning, and increased opportunities for advanced study in high school and beyond. Anecdotally, I also can say that many of the students who have successfully mastered acceleration are much greater agents and advocates for their own lifelong learning. So this is something to consider when we are thinking about using acceleration. Planning for acceleration is also very important. It requires careful evaluation, individualized evaluation. Student readiness is assessed, of course, through test scores, teacher observations, the student's indicators for motivation, and of course, their prior achievement when it comes to academics. Also, we look at collaborating with parents, teachers, and counselors to ensure that there's a holistic understanding of the student's strengths and needs. After implementation, it is critical to continue monitoring the student. We need to monitor the academic progress as well as social and emotional well-being. We need to adjust the plan if necessary, and also don't assume that just because we've put the plan in place that the student may not have some adjustment needs. If necessary, we need to put scaffolding in place, whether there are some social and emotional counseling sessions that need to take place about what some of the norms are in this accelerated setting that perhaps the student hasn't had time to learn, or when it comes to monitoring their knowledge gaps. Because even though the students are capable of the more accelerated learning, they may not have been exposed to all the necessary material. And so it just takes obviously a very patient and a very attuned teacher to be able to guide that acceleration, especially during the initial transition process. Acceleration is most successful when implemented thoughtfully and with a focus on long-term growth and overall satisfaction for that student. So let's talk about Louisiana a bit. We want to bring it home. In Louisiana, gifted IEPs can include specific acceleration goals, such as early access to higher level content, subject acceleration, or even grade advancement. The state's policies provide a framework for planning, documenting, and monitoring these services. Teachers play a critical role in designing acceleration plans and ensuring students thrive academically and socially. Key resources, which we have discussed already, in previous modules, but they include the Louisiana Department of Education Gifted and Talented Guidance, as well as the National Association of Gifted Children's resources on acceleration and best practices. So I recommend that you check these particular resources out, bookmark them. You are going to need them in our program for sure, and you may even need them depending on what your case study is for this particular course. So let's talk a little bit more about the Louisiana resources. In Louisiana, as we mentioned, gifted students receive services through that IEP, making identification critical. I'm sorry that we already reviewed this one. I'm deleting this slide. Sorry. So sorry about that. There we go. This is what we needed to look at. Recycling slides. Here we go. So now let's look at this case example. So we just talked about the Louisiana context and resources. And now let's look at this case example. Please excuse me. When you look at the raw deck of this slide, this will be deleted. This was from our previous module. This case example showcases a student who is already mastering 7th grade math and science content at age 11. Options include grade skipping, subject acceleration, or curriculum compacting in both areas. In Louisiana, these options would be included in the student's gifted IEP, detailing specific academic goals and monitoring plans. It's essential to evaluate social emotional readiness to ensure the student feels supported and successful in interactions with peers. This case demonstrates how individualized planning and the IEP framework work together to meet each gifted learner's needs. So I actually had this happen. The student was actually 12. No, I'm sorry. Yes, he was 12. I'm sorry. He was a 7th grader. And at the time, I was teaching 10th, 11th, and 12th grade English. And this student would ride the bus from his middle school. He was excelling in math and science. The math class was offered at I want to say maybe 4th hour or something like that. And the science class that he needed to take was offered at maybe 6th hour, somewhere in there. Well, he was going to end up with this gap in his schedule where nothing really matched. So what they did was he went ahead to the 10th grade math and science courses. He really was not performing, or we didn't necessarily have the data that he was performing at the 10th grade level in English. However, it made sense for him to stay on campus. So I became part of his IEP plan. And because I was certified to teach middle school, I essentially oversaw an independent plan for him. We decided to do this as a trial where he would be doing, it was basically like an 8th grade plan for English. It was pretty much independent study. I oversaw it. He came to my room. I helped him, but I was actually teaching a class full of juniors at the same time. So it was kind of an interesting situation. We agreed to try it for a semester. And while there were some transition issues that we worked through, it ended up being overall successful. And he actually ended up compacting his curriculum in English, and he skipped ahead in that pathway as well for the next year. So it ended up being a really important way that we were able to accelerate this particular student. He was aiming for math and science acceleration, but because his stakeholders and because his teachers and because the entire system that he was learning in was very flexible, and we wanted to ensure that his best needs were met, it worked really well for him. I can't say that I would have done this for just any student, but obviously this highlights how making the process so personalized and so individualized is essential for the planning, for the acceleration period and the planning overall. So we want to go ahead and look at just a few more resources. We did already talk about the first two. Actually, we talked about the first three because we mentioned the equity, the NAGC equity and diversity one in a previous module. But I also want to revisit that Ford one, recruiting and retaining underrepresented gifted students. So all of these resources are linked in a supplemental section on your Canvas, just in case you need access to any of them for your case study. But I just want to mention them once more. It's just a really great way to dig into how to accelerate content for students. Some of the key takeaways that you want to get from this week's readings and from this week's lecture are that a well-structured program provides the foundation for an effective gifted education, including planning for acceleration. Acceleration is one of the most effective ways to match instruction with student ability. Individualization, as I've mentioned before, is critical. Louisiana's IEP system offers a legally supported framework for documenting and monitoring acceleration and other gifted services associated with acceleration and enrichment. As teachers, our role is to design, implement, and advocate for plans that ensure each gifted student reaches their potential academically, creatively, and socially. So let's take just a moment to reflect on what we have talked about with this module. Think about your own classrooms, those you currently teach, those you'll teach perhaps in the future as a gifted teacher, and those that maybe you took when you were a student. Have you had students, or did you go to school with students, or were you a student who outpaced peers academically? And was it more than just mere advancement? What strategies could we use to meet their needs? How could Louisiana's IEP framework guide our planning, documentation, and monitoring? Today's lesson, or this week's lesson rather, allows you to consider how the theory of acceleration can actually be matched perfectly in practice with our unique, highly advanced gifted students. It prepares us to make individualized, research-informed decisions for all of our students, including those highly gifted students. So I put this chart here, and you can see it comes from Davidson Gifted. The link is provided for you below, but it's just a really quick way to know the difference between acceleration and enrichment. Your text that pairs with this module is going to go into more detail about the difference between enrichment and acceleration, but these are just a couple of the key distinctions that help you understand how they overlap and then what makes them unique. That sometimes can help you when you have a student who's very advanced, even a gifted student. It can help you provide enrichment for them until the need for acceleration makes itself known, whether that's through formal identification, a request from the student or the parents, or simply you as a teacher knowing that this student needs to go to the next grade level. But until then, we can always enrich the content for them. So I hope that this lesson has helped you understand how acceleration works and how we have a legal framework for it. And as you move forward through this module, make sure you check the other supplementary resources provided on Moodle or Canvas, whatever learning platform you're using. Make sure that you pay attention to any announcements from your instructor and pay attention to assignments and deadlines. Let's continue learning together and serving our students with love and fidelity as we meet all their needs. Have a great week.